Good afternoon, Roy.
Hey, good afternoon, Warren. How are you?
I'm really well. How are you?
I'm doing well, all things considered. It's a
Excellent.
bright, sunny day here in New Jersey, and there's a lot of snow that's reflecting and shining off of the from last week. We got hit with a major snowstorm. We actually had about maybe 14 to 16 inches of snow in this area.
Holy smokes, really?
Yeah, it was fun. Not. I felt like I was on Ultima Thule.
Well, that's right. We had a couple of comments in regards to that last week. I heard that down east, a lot of people got dumped on. So we hope
Yeah,
everybody's okay and safe
yeah,
and buried themselves out of the rut, as it
yeah.
were, nicely. Yeah.
Exactly. But yeah, so we are kicking off with year two. And not only are we kicking off with year two, we did the Metamorph last week, and we are doing the Exiles today. Very exciting.
The Exiles. Yeah, it's a fun episode. I remember seeing it as a boy and you know, everything to do with year two was still so new and fresh. It was a different take on things for sure. But yeah, we have some very special guests joining us today as well for this episode, Roy. And we're not going to run that opening again. It's just we have to tweak it a little bit to get around some copyright issues. We'll maybe run it at the end of the episode again. But did you happen to have that ITC synopsis handy?
I do, and I guess I did spoiler alert. I probably should have said maybe you can try to guess, but we're kind of going production order, so I think maybe the folks out there pretty much knew the direction we were going with this. But in case you didn't hear the episode that I just mentioned, the title of the ITC summary goes something like this: Mysterious objects in the space sky. In them, humans from another planet, preserved in a frozen state for 300 years. Two who return to consciousness on the moon have a grim story to tell. But can they be trusted?
Interesting, interesting. Okay, okay. Well, let's dive right in then, and we're really pleased this week, folks, to welcome two very, very special guests to the show, Mr. Nick Williams and Tim Mallet. We'll bring them on right now.
Hi guys.
Hey, hi. Thanks for
Hi,
joining
fellas.
us.
Good afternoon, evening, morning, wherever everybody is.
We are global. No, it's great to see you both. Thank you for joining us too. We really appreciate it.
Pleasure.
Good to be here. Thank you for asking.
Absolutely. And we had the pleasure of seeing you in London, which it's going to be actually coming up on a year and a half this next month, which is crazy. I mean, a year and a half has gone by already. I mean,
It seems only like, weeks ago. Yeah, it is. It is frightening how fast time's flying. Yeah.
It really needs to slow down. And they say time is the only constant in the universe. It's like, what?
Not as you get older, it certainly seems to speed up.
It really does.
No, that was a lot of fun in London. It was so nice to be at a live event, meet real people. Virtual stuff like this is brilliant for reaching people who can't be there, but nothing beats being in the same place where you've got a common interest, and you can be as geeky as you like with people. So yeah, loved it.
There was a lot of build up to that, Nick. You're right, because I mean, of everything that everybody went through with the pandemic, and this is where a lot of this virtual stuff was born out of, and even Roy's show, Roy's tie-dye sci-fi, the virtual events that we did leading up to that. Yes, I mean, everything reopening and getting together again. There was a lot of hype surrounding it, but I think it played out very nicely, and it's a really nice time had by all.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And we're going to do it again this year. I don't know if you heard or not, but
I'd heard a whisper, but for some reason you're going to the frozen north. What is that all about? Manchester, of all places. No, I worked in Manchester for a while. Lovely place. Yeah. So how, why, what made the choice Manchester, and what can we expect up there?
Well, for sure. And listen, I mean, we sort of heard the same thing going into London about why are you having it in London? Right? there's a debate both ways, I'll say for sure.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. Sure.
And then, you know, it really just came down to the fact that, yeah, I mean, of course, we wanted to cater to the other populace, right? But the long and the short of it is that, you know, as you guys are aware, Daryl's Eagle cockpit replica was such an amazing work. We really wanted to highlight that again and feature that, but also make it easy, you know, to pull that off, because Daryl and crew are northernly, so it just made more sense to try and hold it up there, so it's less of a travel and transport dynamics for that crew, right?
And if they've got more time, presumably it'll be bigger. There'll be a pod, and it'll be almost a complete eagle. Yeah.
That's always been on the back burner. That yes, you know, it's a work in progress, and Daryl even said that back in 24, that, you know, that he did what he could in the certain allotment of time, but yeah, I mean, he's going to be working on it throughout the year, and hopefully making it bigger, better, more exciting than ever. So
there is no doubt it was a stunning achievement.
Absolutely.
And then, you know, to see people like Nick Tate sitting in it, and yeah, it was quite magical.
Yeah, and also we had Johnny Garco that was in there too, which was kind of cool.
Yeah.
Tony Cellini himself at the controls.
Yeah, and I mean, it blew everybody's mind as well, even to have Christian Holt sit in that seat holding the picture of himself as a little one with his dad.
That was a special moment.
No, there's been some fantastic photos of the cockpit, and certainly the actors and fans, you know, that got the privilege to sit in the seat.
Yeah, just seeing the reactions of the folks, it's very, very special. Speaking of folks, I just want to say hi to Missy, Chris, Randy, and Ken. They're all out there saying hello. Welcome, everyone. Thanks for joining us. Much appreciated. And yeah, the Exiles. Wow. I remember seeing this back in 1976 when it premiered, and I was literally 10 years old, and it still resonates, and I'm very interested to talk about this episode because there's a lot of layers to this, and when we do these shows, I try to dig deep into doing a little extra research. I mean, for the most part, I've kind of scoured the sources, but I have to say, doing the research for this episode, I actually came across things about this episode that I did not know, and kind of reflecting on it and just watching how it all threads together, it does make sense. But it's kind of cool to find out the behind the scenes of things that, you know, we maybe don't know. And then I always think about, which I always talk about, you guys know this, that lost footage. I'm like, I wonder if it's somewhere, you know, just kind of like in a dark room, and maybe something will, you know.
Well, that's interesting, Roy, because I mean, Tim, as you're aware, in the discovery of those Umatic tapes back a couple years ago, I think you were the one that brought it to my attention that there was an alternate early cut. There was a scene that was drastically different in Exiles. I can't even tell you what it was, but there were some reshoots that did, and unfortunately, yeah, all we got was the broadcast version. But yeah, no, that's interesting, Roy, that there was something. You know, and because this was an early episode, that was they definitely went in and made some changes.
I think when you watch the episode, you can actually see, you know, all in hindsight, we weren't aware of it at the time, but you can actually see it's been re-edited. It's got some filler, but it's also, I think a fair bit was cut from the episode, you know, particularly in the climax. You can see Marilla, you know, she's actually saying something. There's dialogue there, which is completely silent. So, and then there's loads of dubbing of Helena as dodging the laser fire, you know. So yeah, I think that's probably one of the more obvious points, but I'm sure we'll come to that later.
Yeah, and it's, and when you have the opportunity to watch it over and over again, like all of us that have seen these episodes probably like 100 times over, and then when you're really looking for specific items, it's almost like when you're watching it initially, it's on a subconscious level, it's kind of hitting you, but you don't really think about it. But then when you're really searching for different items, it really, to your point, Tim, it stands out.
Yeah, it suddenly seems very obvious, and you know, if you've done that research and you've discovered, you know, more information, your next viewing is going to be, you know, impacted by that, isn't it? So yeah, I saw this originally in '77. I kind of came to it a year later because our area broadcast the second season much later. But the frustrating, you know, as a kid, the frustrating thing, you know, you collect the annuals, and there were loads of pictures of year 2, and you had no idea, you know, what the stories really were, or you know, who this new exciting alien that could change form. We other than a few pictures in the annuals, we had no idea about, you know, who she was or how Moonbase Alpha had changed. Other than, you know, a few stills, so it was quite exciting to see it when it eventually came on.
Yeah, and I always wish there had been something shot where there was some form of introductory scene with Maya to the other Alphans, and you know, them arriving back on the moon, or just having a conversation as far as her introduction into Command Center. I mean, they just kind of launched into it where she was a part of it. And I know that a lot of times, too, these episodes were not being shown in broadcast order. So for syndication purposes, you know, they have the opener, they had the metamorph, and then they could show whatever episode that they would want. And theoretically, it would just flow with that. But it really was a missed opportunity. If they had done, they could have done some kind of bridge with that. But unfortunately, at that time period, things like that didn't seem to happen as often. As it's more conscious now with different productions.
I think that the interesting thing in the novelizations, there was a little bit of a technique to Maya's introduction to the Alphans and her settling in onto Moonbase Alpha. So you did have that kind of perspective, but you know, for one reason or another, they didn't make it into the show. So,
Yeah.
I suppose hindsight's a great thing, and you think they could have done it as a two-parter, which would have been the only way of ensuring people saw it in order, but that would have given them the scope to, as you say, Roy, do that little introductory piece. You know, look who we've brought back with us, kind of thing. Yeah, but just didn't happen in those days. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I agree, Nick, in regards to that, because if they had done Metamorph as a 2 hour or 2-parter, that would have been you know, it would have been the perfect way of having that type of introduction.
It would have built a little continuity. It would have developed, you know, a little bit of in-universe, you know, as opposed to just like, at the end of the Metamorph versus next week, she's just like a fully fledged member of the crew.
Yeah. And of course, it would have given them the scope to explain why they've gone underground. Why so much has changed. They could have, even just in passing, rather than just ignore it as if nothing's happened, and we just have to imagine for ourselves what's happened. And I say hindsight's a great thing, isn't it? But we've got what we've got.
No. And just to add to your comment too, Nick, I mean, we discussed this last week about the deleted scene that was filmed where they had Tony and Sandra discussing the loss of Victor. And again, there would have been that continuity, that explanation that would have been a part of it. And to Chris's point, you know, the audience won't notice, saying, you know, and it's unfortunate that, and I have to say, honestly, as a 10-year-old, I noticed. So, you know, I can only imagine what the adults were thinking that were watching it. So, but.
Well, I have to say, I noticed. You could not notice that it was very different, but I wasn't really pining for Victor or Paul I was still where I wanted to be, which was on Moonbase Alpha. I was still with people I wanted to be largely. So it still had all the good stuff. So probably as a 13, 14-year-old, I probably was aware, but wasn't particularly bothered about it. Not as much as I would have been, a bit later on.
I think we look at all of these shows and we very, programming today is so much more sophisticated, and we forget that how programs were even made in that time.
Right.
I think the whole thing about the sort of the end of year one and year two beginning, the story is that it had to change because the ratings were weak. I don't know how they know. The ratings when year two was commissioned were actually quite strong because it'd only been on air for a couple of months. Right. So what that doesn't quite that part of it doesn't sort of ring true. But I do think I think that Freddie Freiberger comes in for a lot of a lot of negative press, and I don't I don't think he was a bad producer, but I think that for me it was the interference of ITC New York. I think they actually saw it was successful and actually wanted a hand in it. But Jerry said, without Freddie Freiberger on board, they would have had no year two. So, right. I think ITC had a very heavy influence, and somebody, I'm sure ITV wanted Freddie Freiberger quite enthusiastically, let's say.
Well, and that's interesting, Tim, because I'd mentioned last week that one of the things we've sort of gleaned from a lot of those documents that we got from the Landau archive is that actually Freddie was in the running for even year one. There was some talk and some correspondence back and forth that because initially, right, and that's exactly why they onboarded Landau and Bain, is they wanted that Americanization, right? Yeah. But that also did extend back to include discussions with Freiberger for year one.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, that's interesting. I mean, to think that he was involved at those early stages, or not involved, but certainly being talked about in those early stages. But, and yeah, I mean, I think there are probably, agendas that we'll never be fully aware of.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. And I think, fortunately he was, the direction of the show went the way it did for series one, year one. And to your point too, and I remember because at the 2000 convention in New York City, I mean, he was there, and he even made the comment that if those changes had not been made, there would have been no year two. So I'm happy that there was a year two. Do I miss a lot of what was formatted for year one? Absolutely. I mean, that was, that's what I knew. That was Space 1999, but I can't imagine there not being a year two, because there are many year two episodes that I enjoy very, very much personally. Mm-hmm. There's some that, they're not so bad, but there's some moments within them that make me shudder. Even like within this episode, the scene that it was actually an added scene is when Petrov actually is walking and he's with he separates with the technician, and then what happens is there's the explosion. He's pinned under a girder. That was a filler scene. They actually shot that in June of 1976 while they were shooting New Adam, New Eve. And what happened was Kevin O'Connor, my understanding was that he did the directing for that specific piece. They went back and inserted it and as a filler. But the whole point is that, where they have Maya turning into the gorilla, that gorilla outfit. Like, it just kind of makes me cringe a little bit.
This was all part of those reshoots.
He paid a lot of money for that classy gorilla outfit. And I think it appears a couple more times, doesn't it? So,
yeah.
They love that outfit, I think.
Well, and the interesting thing is they even used it in New Adam, New Eve. So it was like, it's like, the guy was on hand, or, that they had it rented or what have you. But yeah, it's just I don't know.
No, for sure. Hey guys, Randy brings up a good point here, just on this same topic. And I think, you know what, you have to say, for better or for worse, those changes, they did what they were intended to do, right?
Sure.
And because I feel the same way, because I was 5 or 6 at the time, but I got more out of year 2 as a 5-year-old, say, than I do nowadays, right? But I think the changes, sort of, they were implemented for a reason, of course, and I think they did their job, right?
Mhm.
Absolutely. I was just thinking about watching it, thinking about the music, and I'm a huge fan of Derek Wadsworth's music. I think it's fantastic. I mean, it certainly wouldn't have been right for Space 1999 year 1, but it absolutely drove year 2. It brought excitement to the scenes. It moved things along, and even actually, if you were to watch some of those scenes silent, they wouldn't be half as exciting as they were with Derek's music. I thought it was fantastic. It's got one of my favourite of Derek, and he, I think when we were mixing the music together, he there were a few raised eyebrows because pieces of music he wasn't particularly proud of. I suddenly jumped up and got excited about, and he would kind of look at me as if, that's such a cheesy piece of music. That's not my proudest moment. But one of my favourite bits is as they go to the research cave, sort of post the in-show titles. And then there's a really great piece of music, sort of heavy brass and timpani, and I love that piece.
With that tracking shot across the moon surface, yeah.
Yes, it really is good. It's a very nice piece. And
I think it just shows you, before it was a popular term, Fred was down with the kids. He knew what the kids wanted. Take from that what you will.
Yeah. Well, and if you look back at a lot of the work he did, I mean, he worked with Hanna-Barbera. I mean, that was kind of his, I'll say his expertise, or, that was what he was, his, what's the word I'm looking for? That was his expertise. Yeah. That's what he was used to dealing with. But
yeah, it was, this could turn into a big year 1, year 2 comparison, and I don't think you need to criticize year 2, but I think in conversations with Johnny Byrne, you couldn't help but feel there were so many missed opportunities, and year 1 was really misunderstood by ITC New York. It wasn't the show they wanted. They wanted another Star Trek hit. That was what they wanted, and obviously I think Freddie's, obviously not necessarily the best year of Star Trek, the original series, but he was known for that, and that they wanted that name on board, I'm sure.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, and I'm a huge, I'll say classic, but I'll just say Star Trek fan from 66 to 69, and the first 2 seasons are my preference. To be fair, there are probably maybe 12 out of the 24 out of the 3rd season that I like. There's some that I really don't. I think as the show started to go towards the end, they lost, Bob Justman, and, budget was going down, and I'm with you on that, in regards to that. But again, we're not bashing year 2. We're just talking about the differences, and there are differences. That's the reality of the situation, and it's okay to discuss that.
But I think still, it's still got a lot of merits. Definitely the pace has picked up. But then, and again, not as a criticism, but just purely as a comparison. Really, the Exiles for me is kind of Alpha Child. It's the same story, really, and. Alpha Child was mysterious. The aliens were quite obviously evil. The aliens in the Exiles, through no fault of the actors, were just very bland. I mean, it was quite clever that we didn't really know whether they were friendly aliens or not. but when their true colours were shown, it wasn't particularly dramatic. It wasn't, they didn't. I'm not saying that you should have camped it up, but they didn't really seem very sinister.
Yeah.
Well, there were all the little camp hints, like when what's his name, Cantos wheeled into the medical centre and his eyes open when he's supposed to be out for an hour, and that was kind of, and you get Derek's little musical sting, and you think that's the hints, that's where right, okay, so they're not as sweet and light as we thought they were going to be, and then it just builds from there.
One of my issues with the story, and this is that initially Koenig is really pushing to have the one container brought down. He does it, and they really are still in the dark about things, and they almost lose Canner, and then they pretty much get him stable. And then the next thing you know, he's saying, let's get another cylinder down, and then he's arguing the point with Helena that their life might be necessary. They may really need to know how to do suspended animation. Their survival may count on it. He's really pushing this. And then what happens is they have her brought down. It's successful. And then Canner wants the rest of them to be revived. And he's like, out of the question. We can't do it. And then Canner's offering him, the secret of suspended animation. And he's saying no. So it's like, what happened in there? You know what I mean? It's almost like there's a missing piece. There is something that could have been more integral to that story, where there was a transition in his thought processes. Now, to be fair, Canner was saying, let's bring down the whole populace in order to save them. And Koenig's like, we can't do it because our life support systems won't survive. And then the other piece of that is too, Helen, he says, Dr. Russell, in charge of life support, will explain. And she says, we can't even permit any new births on Alpha. It's like, Alpha child, what happened? And it's like right there. So it's those inconsistencies that kind of bug me. And I've every time I watch this episode, it's like, why did he change so dramatically? I mean, there's no explanation. And then the other piece, which I've read Martin Landau, and I think he's referring to this episode pretty much when he just stuns Canner out of nowhere. You know what I mean? And he just, he's trying to justify it, make sure that their weapons were, effective. But still, I don't know.
I think that's certainly Martin Landau. That was really the start of him questioning Freddie's approach, and certainly the attention to detail in the script, because he just said, I was doing things that Koenig wouldn't have done.
And it is those inconsistencies. As Tim said, I've sat and watched it again in preparation for this, and in those underground labs where they're trying to open the canister, and there's the guys in the silver suits and everything, all protection, PPE and everything to make sure they're protected. But then after they've pierced the canister, Koenig just walks in his normal uniform, and you think, now's the really dangerous time. The thing's just blown up.
Yeah.
And you just walk. No, it hadn't blown up at that point, but you just walk in like totally unprotected, and it's little things like that you think that wouldn't have happened. I don't think that would have happened in year one. I think there was more truth to it. I think there was more. It's not about like you say. There's no point bashing year two. It is what it is. But there are things like that you think that kind of thing wouldn't have happened. They'd have said, shouldn't we all have PPE on now?
Well, and it even goes to the extreme of telling Helena and Matthias to
stay back.
Stay there, right? Yeah, don't come in.
It's quite
Absolutely.
to death and destruction, but
I'm seeing some comments coming through. David hi, David. Thanks for joining. Thanks everybody that we haven't mentioned too for joining us. David said, I like the Exiles, was sort of the 1999 version of Space Seed. Yeah, Koenig acted differently here, but you got to cheer when he pushes over into space. Lots of laughs.
Yeah.
Now, here's another point I want to bring up. This is something else that bothered me. Okay, so they're in the passenger module of the Eagle. They have their front life support, supports on. They don't have the oxygen on the back. So that's the one thing. And they put the helmets on. There clearly is a port for the helmet to connect oxygen. And what happens is, yes, they have their helmets on, but where are they getting their oxygen? Now, supposedly, Koenig untethers Zova, and Canners says to her, your lifeline. He unhooked it, but lifeline there is not oxygen line. It's essentially it's a tether that's making sure that if she goes out into space, she's not going to go floating and out into space. So how would they be able to breathe? I mean, I'm just, you know what I mean? It's a little detail like that. That's
I think that is, again, and you simply cannot help while watching year 2 but compare it with year 1. And things weren't perfect in year 1 either. But I think what the impression I certainly got, certainly from actors like Xenia, is that everybody was absolutely willing year 1 to be successful. The attention to detail, the person I certainly think didn't lose it really was Keith Wilson. The sets were still incredible.
Oh yeah.
Just looking at the Exiles today, there's such depth in the sets. You'd see through a window, or you'd look through a doorway, and you'd see a whole corridor, or you'd see the nuclear generator, or what it was. So the kind of the scale of Moonbase Alpha was certainly still there, but it just seemed like things were done in a hurry.
Yeah.
Whether they had all this kind of hiatus before year 1 was broadcast, but then when it was broadcast, it seemed as if it had to get moving very, very quickly, and perhaps they didn't really prepare for it quite as well as they should have done. But then equally, as year 2 progresses, there are fluffed lines, that I'm sure they would have retaken in year 1. They're just left in the program.
Yeah,
and year 2, you can sort of get a sense of that hurriedness, right, with the double up episodes and things like that, Tim. But you know what? Strictly speaking, Exiles, I think you're right as well, because there was still a sense of that. And the one scene I mentioned to Roy last night was there's a beautiful aerial shot of the underground research area, right?
Yeah.
Where you could, and it really, I mean, that whole environment is still very large and spacious, and sort of has a lot of that year 1 vibe to it, right?
Yeah.
But unfortunately, with subsequent episodes, that it's lost a little bit.
Yeah, sometimes I think that some scenes are shot hurriedly and flatly, but I think it's probably because of the modular nature of the set, certainly for Moonbase Alpha. There is still a lot of depth, and even if you watch something like I say Spacewalk, the depth of some of the scenes in those corridors is incredible still, and Keith Wilson was certainly really on that, and so were the directors and the lighting people. That it still looked very real, I think.
Yeah, the cinematography really sells it. Because if it's appearing bland, and if the lighting's not right, and to your point about the sets, what Keith Wilson did, that would make the difference. I mean, it would look cheesy, and it doesn't. It still holds to this day, and it's literally 50 years later, and we're still talking about it. So that's pretty impressive in itself, which is really good.
Certainly, I think it has an energy about it. There is an excitement, and they did throw in the extra scene with Maya and the explosion, and so she could have turned into a better creature than the gorilla suit, I think. But it does add a little bit more excitement, and perhaps you can kind of see why they might have done that. But yeah, and I think actually there is still a little bit of year 1 in the Exiles. It hasn't completely changed into what it became. There's still a seriousness, but then you get these interjected scenes. Maya pretending to be Helena, which I guess as 11-year-old was kind of cute, but now you do cringe. It's it just doesn't seem to really work. It's too cheesy.
I had read that Donald James wrote the script to this, and originally this was written prior to with the intent of having year one characters. And originally, it was supposed to be Bergman and Helena that are kidnapped and go to Galos with Cantor and Zova. And then what happens is when she comes back, she returns Bergman, and then it's essentially Helena and Cantor by themselves. And then also, instead of being a 300-year period of time, it was supposed to be a 60-year period of time. And Morella was Ragnar's granddaughter, not this, descendant over a 300-year period.
Yeah, yeah. Well, again, that probably might make sense. Why did it have to be? 60 years would have worked just fine, really.
Yeah. They decided to make that change. And then the other thing was a couple of other tidbits I came across was the live action in regards to the title sequence. It was filmed during this episode being made. And also in regards to that, where the cuts were taking place, that scene with Helena and Maya, I guess originally they were going to be talking about fashion on Earth and in the late 20th century. And then what happened was there was another scene where after that, where I guess Helena goes to see Cantor and Zova to see how they're progressing. Then the next scene after that was going to be going back to the command center, where it was intended to have Maya teasing Tony in regards to that whole thing about the switch that she had pulled on Commander Koenig, and then it was all over the base. And then what happened was they decided not to go with it because of the flow. And then I guess this was decided during pre-production in April of that year of 1976. So what they did was they took that scene and they edited it. So the whole thing in regards to the fashion was cut. It's just basically Helena talking to Maya about how you can change into any, alter your shape. And they went with that. Everything in regards to fashion was deleted. Then in regards to the sequence with Maya teasing Tony, that was pushed to the end. And what happens is, too, in that whole sequence, Koenig actually enters the command center and wants Maya and Tony to check on the aliens' progress as well. So that was cut because it was put at the end of the episode. In fact, Tony is talking to Maya, you can even see the command center doors open. They're starting to open, and then the scene cuts right to Koenig being with Helena in the final scene at the end of the episode. So it's, and Tim, you were saying earlier, there was a lot of edits taking place and a lot of things going on. And it's like, unless you're aware, I mean, you can pick it up on a subconscious level, but having read this information and then I'm like looking for it, you can really see the chops.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think there are a number of, even when you're not aware of it, there are a number of scenes that seem to be kind of either edited in or abruptly cut, and certainly the scenes with the overdubs that strikes you as something that was obviously changed, quite late down the line.
And in your research, Roy, did it show up anywhere who actually dubs Cantor's voice?
No, I did not come across that.
That remains a mystery, doesn't it?
Yeah, I would really be very interested to know about that as well.
And why?
Why
as well? Because you think Peter Duncan could have easily done it. He'd done plenty of acting, got perfectly good voice.
And I hate to say it, is it to make him sound more American? I mean,
I think that's exactly the reason. Yeah.
I mean, but to me, it was a necessity, and we see this throughout, the series with different, Diana Morris is the other one that comes immediately to mind. That the actress Toby Robbins was dubbed over, and
Mark of Arcanon.
Etrek, yeah.
Etrek, yes.
Yeah.
I think there was probably, again, it probably comes from this ITC feedback. Is like there are not enough American voices in the show, so maybe they just went back randomly and picked actors that they were going to redub.
So every pair of aliens, one's got to be American, one's got to be English.
I mean, and here's the thing too. I mean, if you really want to be a nitpicker, and this can be said about any show. I mean, now they're kind of dealing with it. How come they always speak English? How come we can understand? You know what I mean? It's like you could always take it to that level and say, you're dealing with an alien culture, and they, you know what I mean? They speak English, but that's something as viewers we just accept. So it's a shame that they had to change, the dialect because of that. I mean, I don't know. It's
changing tack entirely.
Yeah.
Last year or the year before, finally got around to watching Star Trek Enterprise, which I'd missed first time round, and they do address that that they've got a little translator thing, and I think, and it's nice that they've tried to put some guts around why do we suddenly understand all these aliens. That was a nice touch, I thought.
No, we're actually watching Enterprise. We just got through was it the second season. I am really enjoying Enterprise. I watched the first season, maybe the complete first season, maybe about 15 years ago, and enjoyed it, and I just never went back to it. And now watching it, it's a shame that show was canceled, but that's a whole nother discussion for another time.
Yeah, I didn't want to distract us too much, but I thought
I totally agree with you about that, Nick, and that's an excellent point. I mean, in regards to that,
I think if you compare it with its kind of twin episode, you look at the way Jarek kind of reveals himself eventually, and begins to speak English, and is struggling with it. So there is some kind of attempt to explain that, and that in itself adds atmosphere and mystery and wonder, So in my mind, to spend some time on that wouldn't have been detrimental to the story, or even have slowed the story down that much, And there are, again, it's the year two drive to move the story on. I think we see a lot of assumptions by the characters. They'll all suddenly say, that, for instance, the Exiles had, committed terrible atrocities, and well, at that point they don't know very little about Cantor and Zoba. They've just got to the planet. But all of a sudden they know a lot of information. Whether that was cut from the script, we don't know. But it happens then quite a lot. There's a lot of assumption. They talk about, is it Tron 2 and the death symbol in Mark of Arcanon? Something that we as the audience would not have been aware of. There's the international or the universal plague warning signal.
I know.
That really don't make sense. They would make sense much more in a Star Trek universe, because there's the human race are integrated with all of these other species, but it doesn't make sense for Space 1999. And I know it moves the story along, and it might create a bit of intrigue, but it did kind of spoil it a little bit, I think.
Yeah, it's almost like you're breaking certain rules with that, and that was one of the things, and we'll talk about that when we talk about Dorzak, that made me cringe, is the universal plague warnings. It's like, what? What are you talking about? You know what I mean? And to your point, Tim, it's if it was the Federation would know that, you know what I mean? Because then they would be, it would be something, it would go through the different systems and everything. Yeah. And that's the thing with, and again, I'm not trying to, and folks, I'm just going to say this once. I said this last week.
Say it once more. Go on.
I'll say it once more. I am not a year two basher. None of us are. It's just that we're just pointing out different points. I mean, and we pointed out different things in year one as well. All I'm just saying is, right now we're just talking about some of these inconsistencies, things that could have potentially been overlooked, because it does potentially help the story, but in regards to the in-universe, it really doesn't. And I'll say, in my opinion, I mean, whatever your opinions are, you know what, no problem. But it's just that little things like that. I mean, they refer to this planet as the Peace Planet too, Golos, and they use this over again in the Mark of Arcanon, the planet of peace. So it's just little things like that.
Yeah.
Some other comments coming through. Let's see. Chris said, even quite young audience members see things Roy mentions. Kids are smart. It's all the illogical behavior that grates. The audience will never notice. Missy's out there. She was with us last week. Hi, Missy. She said, how quick did they get that darn Eagle door closed? And had they actually did what they needed to do, decompression is it called, before they opened the door? Yeah. Ricardo is joining us. I want to say hi to Ricardo. We were smart kids, he's saying. Yeah, we were.
Yeah, I think probably, you know, if we'd have stayed with year one for the length of time that it took to get engaged with year two, then I think we would have probably been quite sort of deep thinking as kids. We would have probably had a little bit of patience with the stories and a little bit of interest in the sort of metaphysical element of year one. So I think we probably would have, even as a kid, been a little bit critical of it.
Yeah, I agree.
It was still exciting, and I remember at the end of year two episodes absolutely buzzing with it. So it gave me a great deal of joy. So that's my positive contribution to you.
And we were talking about the action sequences. There was action there. How about when Tony and Maya are going into the power room, yeah. And then what happens is Maya goes right to the guard because he's unconscious and she's checking on him. Tony comes in and he calls out to her, and he gets stunned just as he hits the alarm. He goes down. And then Maya has this intense look in her eyes. And then it's like her and Zova are like battling it out with their stares. And what happens is she leaps, and then you have the Panther in midair. That whole sequence was really incredible.
Fantastic shot.
It was. That was fantastic. My only thing was, why didn't she, and she drops the stun gun and she screams, and you're thinking, okay, Maya's got them, but then she allows her to pick up the stun gun, and then she's able to shoot her, and I'm like, well, but
that's just the Panther brain for you.
But before that, the best bit of action of all is when Helena goes for the alarm button and she gets shot, and she collapses the most beautifully balletic movement. Yep. Exactly. Not like a sack of potatoes like anyone would do if they'd been shot. That was a stunning bit of action there.
Not like Martin Landau, who used to land on his one arm.
Yeah.
Oh goodness! Yeah.
But you know what? And guys, the other thing is, say what you will, and again, I'm going to relate it back to my first viewing. Is that, and here's again a touch of year one, is that it sort of did have that scary, horrific sequence near the end where Cantor was aging rapidly, right?
Yeah,
yeah. There's a couple of really good moments in that. I thought that when they bring the capsule into the cave. And there is a quite a degree of suspense there, even though they do suddenly open the doors and walk in without any protection. There is intrigue. There's something there that works quite well, and the ending is quite dramatic. Again, slightly kind of watered down by this dubbing, but it was quite an exciting scene. You didn't know whether Helena or Tony were going to get shot. So yeah, that was quite good. And there are explosions and lasers going off everywhere. So what's not to like about that?
Oh yeah.
The other thing, guys, wasn't Peter Duncan wonderful in London?
Yes. Yeah. Got a soft spot for Peter Duncan. I'm gonna tell my story now because I knew this is my shot. So many years ago, I met Peter Duncan through work, and I've actually found through a bit of research. I've been doing a Roy here, doing a bit of research. It was the 2nd of May 2008, and a company I was working for sponsored the Scouts, Boy Scouts, for one of their badges, and because of my job, I was invited to go to Scouts headquarters where a bust of the Queen was going to be unveiled. The Queen was going to be there, and we were going, not just me, but a number of sponsors were going to be presented to the Queen. But I was more excited. Well, I was quite excited about meeting the Queen, but I was actually more excited because Peter Duncan was Chief Scout at the time. And I remember after all, the Queen had done her thing, and we were all there with a glass of champagne. And I went up to Peter Duncan and I said, I'm so pleased to have met you. And he thought I was going to talk about his time on Blue Peter. And I said, no, not Blue Peter. You were Kantar in Space 1999. He goes, oh my God, no one talks to me about that. I said, yes, that's really why I wanted to come here and to meet you. And he was so lovely. And then I recounted the story to him in Heathrow a couple of years ago. And he's, brilliant. He's a lovely guy.
Yeah, he was very gracious, and he, quite young at heart and whimsical himself, as you can see. I mean, he was the first one picking up that stun gun and posing in photos and things like that. He was great.
Yeah, good guy.
Yeah, and he was one of the younger performers on the series because he was 22 at the time, and Stacey Doring was 18, and I guess she was known for series, and I hadn't seen it, but Black Beauty, she was in that.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh, that's what's the opposite of one of my favorite? I hated Black Beauty with a passion, mainly because where I lived, it was a show always on before Space 1999 or Thunderbirds, and it's like, when will this damn show about a bloody horse finish so we can watch something interesting? Oh. But then I saw the Exiles and I thought Stacey Dornan can do some good stuff as well. So.
Honestly, there was a lot of promotional material with her too. I mean, they were in the travel tube. There were a lot of shots that were done, and again, it was, as Warren was saying, early year two. Yeah.
Well, in general, guys, we were even mentioning that promo book, right? And there was a lot of shots from Exiles. Well, there was only shots from Metamorph and Exiles. Yeah. So it was featured heavily in some of the early promotion, of course. It was interesting that because there's even shots of her in the travel tube where she's never even featured in the travel tube throughout the episode, is she? I don't think so. No.
I think interestingly, when you see some of these promo shots for year one, it was a little objectifying of women at times. I mean, certainly the Devil's Planet outfits, hit the papers. There were obviously a number of shots done for that. There was the Bringers of Wonder Part 2, the glamorous women that were in that. So there was they were trying to get a certain type of press, I think, which
but with Kantar's outfit, they did kind of balance it out, didn't they?
Well, I guess there was a little something for everyone.
Form fitting.
David commented, he said Stacey Doring was also in Britcom called Keep It in the Family. The inspiration for the US is Too Close for Comfort. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yes, I'd forgotten about that. Used to love that.
Yeah. And then also, and this goes to show you too, with pre-production and everything, they do some flashback sequences. I mean, Helen is talking about how things are progressing on Alpha. We get to see the Eagle from Eagle 4 from the Metamorph. It's in the underground hangar with the booster units. We also get to see the Solarium shot, which is from the T4. So there's that sequence that's going on, and I think there's also a sequence with the moon buggy on the moon, which I also think was from the Tabor as well. So.
And another positive with the Exiles, we get to see a different configuration of the Eagle with the grab arm for the capsules. So that's quite interesting.
Yes, absolutely. And this was the introduction of the third 44-inch Eagle that they commissioned for the series, which is really cool too.
And also, I don't know if it could just be because it's a long time since I've watched all the series, but when you get that shot of the passenger module and they're with Stacey Dornan putting the spacesuits on and everything, and you see both sides of the passenger module, or it was always from one side and you just see a door and a computer panel, but it was all of a sudden it's this huge room, which I don't remember seeing before.
Yeah, it was a nice perspective to your point, Nick.
Hey,
Yeah.
fellas, there's an interesting comment out there from Christopher Michael Dalton saying, Tim, I enjoyed your work on the Space 1999 documentary. Would love to see it on Blu-ray in the near future.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you very much. Well, I think if Fanderson felt there was enough interest in a Blu-ray, then that might be possible.
Interesting. And we should maybe just use that to transition, fellows. And of course, down through the years, Fanderson has had an extensive history with Space 1999 fandom. Why don't you just give us a little overview of what's been in the works or what's new, even going into 2026?
Can't tell you. If I told you, I'd have to kill you. No, I mean, all joking aside, I former chairman Chris Bentley made a point that we at the time we never announced stuff until it was in the works, in production, because you raise expectations and then something goes wrong, and unlike companies who can just shed loads of money at stuff, we're all volunteers, and if someone goes in hospital or whatever happens, anything can go wrong. So I still don't like to say too much about what we've got in the plan. I think the thing is, what we try and do is kind of skirting around the subject a bit, but what we try and do is, and as far as I can think, always try to do is things that are not commercially viable. I suppose I'll immediately counter that by saying, well, the soundtracks obviously are commercially viable, but they needed so much work that no commercial outfit would have been able or willing to just say, let's release a Space 1999 soundtrack and to the quality. So because of the way we're funded by the members, we were able to invest some money into doing the work that needed to be done. But a lot of the time we try and do stuff that will surprise people, like our anniversary tea towels last year for UFO Thunderbirds of Space 1999. I mean, what a ridiculous idea! But we had a couple of members saying, have you ever thought of doing tea towels? And it's like, no, we haven't. And do you know, it is amazing how popular they've been. And I suppose in this day and age of dishwashers, people don't really pick a tea towel up and dry their crockery and everything, but they've sold, they've done really well. So yeah. So I'm desperately trying to skirt around the question.
No, we understand, Nick.
That's okay, but you know what? To back up a little bit, and Ken Scott has already made the comment, and I think Roy, you're of the same opinion. The work you fellas did on those soundtracks, we are forever in your debt. And Tim in particular. I mean, boy, I mean the research and the time invested. It just we can't thank you enough.
Well, thank you, and I'm thrilled that they were really well received, and because they were well received, we were able to do more. But as with most things that happen through Fanderson, this isn't just one person. There are a whole group of enthusiasts, as you know, with the conventions. If you were doing it yourself, you just simply couldn't do it. So we were really lucky to have this group and connection with fans who were willing to put their own money into something to get it done to a good standard, and it was for all of us, I think, an absolute labour of love. It was so exciting, with Space 1999 to get those master tapes from Polygram, and then disappointing because they couldn't be played because all the glue for the oxide was starting to decompose. Then the elation when they were baked and we were able to play them and transfer them digitally, and to hear that mix for the very first time, that drum roll, in stereo with a really powerful bass was just so exciting. And you will have certainly, with your discovery of the pneumatics, there's every one that you put in the machine must have been, there must have been a great anticipation of what's coming next, and that it does. It spurs you on to do more, and I'm a fan of the show, and I've thoroughly enjoyed doing the work that I've done. It's 99% of the time it's not work. It's just an absolute joy. And then you meet through that work. You meet people, like Catherine Boujol and Roberto Baldassari, and just lots of people. And Andrew Frampton was incredibly helpful in the beginning of mixing the Space 1999 soundtracks. We spent hours transferring tapes, and it's just such a joy to share your love of a program with other people, and then find out that they're incredibly talented and creative, and you can share your love with them, that greater audience, and sometimes the audience is hugely appreciative, but then you've also got this kind of pressure that they can also be incredibly critical too. If you get it wrong, then they're not going to be afraid to tell you. It's just when you get it right, it's a real thrill. And I think starting off purely as a fan, but then eventually getting to meet the stars and production people and having interesting discussions with them, most of which appear on things like the documentary, but then having those, and you guys will know, and anyone that attends the convention, those kind of personal conversations and connection you gain with people is a huge honor, and just such a joy and pleasure, and it's amazing that a show can bring so many people with a love of the show together, and it forms friendships, and that's, I guess that's why you do the conventions. That's why you enjoy bringing those people together and facilitating these kind of creative discussions.
It really is, Tim, about sort of and collectively, not just Roy and myself, but there's so many people, the list of names, but just keeping the spirit and keeping the flame alive, right? As it were. It's a wonderful feeling, and especially when you hear, you get that feedback that it's so appreciated, right? But the other thing is even just the resurgence the last few years with merchandising in general, like I'm thinking the model kits, what's happened with that round 2 model kit release has just been phenomenal, thanks to people behind the scenes like yourselves with the soundtracks and Fanderson, but Chris Trice and Gordon Moriguchi, Todd Morton with that round 2 release has just really been fantastic.
Well, and they're those kind of things, I think, I remember being at conventions and people would ask that question, well, why isn't Fanderson doing action figures or models? And the investment necessary in these things is incredible.
Licensing, yeah.
Fortunately, they've been successful, and and that's why I guess there've been so many Eagle models over the years. Yeah. But just you can see the kind of evolution of them. They're perfecting them, and fans are feeding back and talking about what could be improved, or what didn't work, and it's great. It's kind of I suppose self-perpetuating, isn't it?
I remember having
I'm
sorry. I was just going to say, I remember having a meeting with the head of licensing at ITV a few years ago, and it was one of our first meetings, and she said, "So what do the fans want?" And I said, and it was one of those questions that really stumped me, and I thought, what they want is authenticity. You know, they don't want the slightest little thing wrong. They want it to be right. They want it to be what they see on screen. They want it. They don't want made up stories, or you know, they want what the show is. And I'm really pleased that during that period of time at ITV, when they were managing the licensing of Jerry's and Sylvia's shows, you know, there was a real desire to ensure that every licensee understood that, and you know, some nice things did come out at the time, which is good. And the thing is, that's what we contribute to. That's what we as fans offer up to licensees, to try and make things better. And as you say, you know, there's very few people know an eagle as well as Chris tries. I won't say that there aren't anyone, but there are very few people. And, you know, so if you're making a model, why wouldn't you get him involved, you know?
Yeah, and I think that's such an excellent point because, and I'm going to do a Star Trek crossover right now with this. As a kid, for me, I mean, and this is even before 1999 was on, in regards to props, the Star Trek communicator was like, it was the thing, and it still is. It's one of my favorite props. And as a kid, we basically had those utility belts. They had the AMT kits that they had, and you know, the cover, the grill was like silver. They they spray painted it with the silver stuff on, and then they actually sold the belts. And it was so small, and it is like an 8, 9, 10-year-old. It was like, why can't I have what's on the television, you know? And it was just like, now fast forward 50 years later, over the years, we've seen so many different incarnations of replicas, and even throughout that time period, there's companies that just wouldn't get it. And for me personally, like Lawn Company did the communicator, and it seems to be one of the most accurate reproductions in regards to scale and everything. And doing the, you know, now I'm going to cross over with 1999 with the Comlocks and the stun guns. I mean, it's like there's been so many variations, but as fans, I think that, to your points, that we really do, you know, we tend to be overly critical because it's just that we just really want to have what we saw on the screen. But then what we saw on the screen, there was so many versions of it too, though. That's the irony, because they had the stunt Comlocks or the heroes, and the same thing with the stun guns. But
a lot of what you're talking about, and this kind of is then linking back to the episode to a degree, but it is respect for your audience, isn't it? You know, don't assume that we don't care what's happened to Victor. You know, don't assume that, and don't try to pretend, you know, nothing has changed. You kind of do owe us an explanation. But you know, as you say with the merchandise, you know, as a kid, you know, I was 11 years old, and I hated the fact that the eagles had a green or a blue beak. I had to find that one eagle that had the white beak.
The two and mix and match them.
Match them up, you know, and you know, the other ones could go in the trash. You know, I just wanted to. so it's, you know, they should have had more respect for us, I think.
Tim, I was the same way. I just, and I know there's so many fans that love those type of eagles, and it's like, again, I always say, you know what, if that's what you like, that's wonderful. But for me, I always wanted to see what was on the screen. That was, I just, if you know, it wasn't green, it wasn't blue, it was, you know, it was white. So I totally with you on that.
I think they did they did one reasonable version of the stun gun in the early days. I mean, it was plasticky and cheap, but it at least looked quite like the stun gun. It was a little small, but as a kid, it kind of fitted into your hand, and it had lights that came on. But yeah, and then they would do other versions which would have the Space 1999 logo on. And you think, well, that wasn't on the stun gun.
Exactly.
I don't need to have that on the stun. I know what it's from.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Chris said the Eagle Kit outsold the USS Enterprise. We knew there was a huge market for it, but round 2 needed their arm twisting. Once it took off, they were convinced, and all the other 1999 items suddenly followed. Shame it didn't happen 50 years ago. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, but then 50 years ago, who had the money to buy them?
Yeah.
So there you go.
There you go.
Yeah. pocket money, are they now?
No, awesome. Well, listen, without giving anything away, guys, you know, Roy and I do sincerely hope. Well, you guys know you have an open invite to join us in Manchester in September, and we hope you can make an appearance. You guys, it was so nice to see you guys a couple years ago, and we're all just looking forward to that opportunity again. Like we've already discussed, fellas, that it's so nice to get together. And
I would never presume, but the date is in my diary. I'm planning to be there. We have had discussion, a bit like when we came to Heathrow, we had a couple of new bits of merchandise there to surprise people, and so hopefully, if we're there in Manchester, we will be doing something again that those in Manchester will get it first. Yep,
that's awesome.
Very nice.
I just want to interject one quick comment from Stephen Reeder. Hey, Stephen, thanks for joining. He said, I remember having a conversation at the very first convention in Ohio on whether we would ever have a year 2 soundtrack. Thank you for giving us everything. So Stephen saying thank you. Just want to put that.
Was that a conversation with Barry Gray? Because I think he was at that. I think he was at that convention, wasn't he?
He was. That's right.
Yeah, maybe he wasn't part of that convention. No, it is brilliant. I mean, as Tim said, you know, to be able to, you get the thrill of you know, doing some of these things, but then when you hear just how much people have appreciated them, it is lovely. You know, in as much as I've always loved doing conventions and just seeing people happy. And you know, it's not, you think I did a good thing there today. Yeah, it's good.
I think that for the most part, you do these things, and it's you know, from a very, very selfish point of view, it's kind of what you want to do for yourself, but you know other people will enjoy it. You know people will enjoy it. But it's not until you go to a convention and talk to people you realise, you know, that it has had an impact. You know, I suppose the only sign you have is that people have bought it before, and then there are, you know, then you talk to people, and you know, it's very humbling to hear that it has meant something to people, you know, and but yeah, just great fun to do. I mean, going back to the you know, the like-minded fans and talented people out there, when we first had the idea for Message from Moonbase Alpha, we talked, you know, to fellow fans, we talked to Xenia, we talked to Johnny, and you know, they were just overwhelmingly positive about it. Yeah, let's make it happen. And you know, then you guys know what that feels like when you do connect with people that want to, you know, have got a will to make something happen just out of love. And I think that, again, Xenia said it, you know, for her recollections of year 1 is that there was an overwhelming love for the show. Everybody wanted to make it successful. And I think that did carry through into year 2. Martin Landau was obviously very passionate about it and did all he could do to make it as authentic and as convincing as possible. You know, sometimes I think they fought a battle either with Freddie or ITC New York, but generally I think they were all wanting to make it successful. I don't think they did anything deliberately to sabotage year 2. I just think maybe sometimes it was the speed, and perhaps some of the other talent, whether it was the actors or some of the production people, weren't necessarily given the respect and the support that they were given in year 1. But you know, despite all of that, you know, there was some great stories in you know, I love the immunity syndrome, and that's a little way off your episode. But again, there were little flashes that perhaps when cancellation was looming, there were little flashes that actually some of that kind of background talent kind of came through, and they really put their all into those latter episodes. I think that maybe the Dorcons tailed off a little bit. You know, there was probably the budget was probably dwindling at that point. But generally, those latter episodes, I think they tried to, bring something to them. Certainly, as a Sound Spectre was a good one as well. So.
Oh, that is one of my favorite episodes of series 2, and I've said before too, I wish that had been a 2-part episode. I mean, because there's so much that could have been explored in that episode, and they really, in 52 minutes, there's so much that's crammed into that, and it definitely to me holds up. And to your point, those later episodes, Devil's Planet wasn't a favorite of mine when I was younger, but in regards to the story and everything that it circles around it, and it's one of my favorite now. And then also, like you said, the immunity syndrome that always has been, and the Dorcons. There could have been different things that could have been a little bit better. I mean, we'll get into it, but it's excellent points though in regards to.
I think Hildegard Neal has some good scenes in Devil's Planet. it's a little but yeah, she does. She does, give it her all, and I think there's some, and there were quite good lines in that as well. It was quite an interesting perspective, but then it does kind of fail in other ways.
Yeah.
Great stuff. And I think you said you were talking about obviously the Metamorph last week, and I think that was a pretty full story. I don't think there was kind of much room for greater character development and greater development of the way Freddie wanted the series to go. But I think you say now in the Exiles, you see that he's trying to add some humour into it, and again, I've heard this before, but absolutely. Catherine Schell, her acting ability as Maya really made that character convincing.
Yeah.
And she had to deliver some cheesy lines, but she delivered it believing in those lines, and I think that made a huge difference, not just to her character but to the show. She really brought something to it.
No, she definitely sells it. And we were even talking last week about how there was talk of potentially having her have her own series. There would have been a spinoff. So really, she really conveyed to the fans. I mean, the reaction. I mean, when anybody thinks of season 2, immediately Maya is the immediate go-to in regards to, or one of the immediate go-tos of the second series. Yeah, perfect timing, Warren.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting. We were mentioning this last week, fellas, about how there was so much emphasis on not so much even Maya, but Catherine Schell, right? And how they really spun it, with her just coming off of Return to the Pink Panther and things like that. They were really going for that brand name recognition.
Yeah. And so again, you've talked about Freddie Freiberger being. In the background in year 1, and of course Catherine Schell guested on year 1. But I think there was certainly from somebody that was a really determined, someone was very determined to get Catherine Schell in the second series, and though I think Jerry speaks about Catherine and with admiration and affection, but he said there was a lot of energy behind her being cast as Maya. But yeah, she was. I think Jerry said she was the first choice and the right choice. She absolutely was. She really brought something to the role.
Nah, she really did. Well, this has been great, and we're so happy that you were able to join us today. So thank you again, both of you.
Thank you for inviting.
No, great.
Sorry, my sound went then, so I didn't hear you. I'm just nodding like an idiot.
No, it's all good. No, I was just saying thank you.
Yeah, really great segment, guys. Always a pleasure to see you and catch up, of course. And to everybody out there as well tuning in today, we appreciate things. Your support ongoing is just so lovely to see, and keep tuning in, because Roy and I, of course, how many more segments do we have, Roy?
We have 22 more.
Yeah.
And if you follow production order, should I say it, or should we keep everyone guessing as far as what's going to be next?
Next week?
Yep.
Well, that's got to be either All the Glisters or One Moment of Humanity.
One Moment of Humanity.
There we go. Yeah.
Episode number 3.
Oh, One Moment of Humanity. Oh, a lovely one.
Roy's favorite episode.
Just for the record, no.
No.
But I will say, in regards to everything that's happening today, it is relevant, especially with AI. So there's the 50-year connection there. So, but
Yeah.
I mean,
Well, I think Space 1990 was ahead of its time. It was kind of piloting Dancing with the Stars, really, in that episode.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know,
on that note,
I just thought of, wasn't it between Exiles and One Moment of Humanity where they did all those famous production scenes in Command Center? Because didn't they have a couple of the costumes from One Moment of Humanity where Koenig and Allen are throwing people over their shoulder and things like that? Really.
well, and even the one technician that's in the silver suit that's in the Exiles, that I think he has one line. He says, "Commander." He actually is featured in those publicity photos. Only he's in,
That's right.
He's got like blue makeup on, or
Yes.
blue,
Oh, yeah.
I don't recall the actor's name, but that was so yes, to your point, Warren.
Well, we're gonna have to have a whole extra segment on those production photos because they're so infamous.
Great stuff.
Boy, oh boy. Okay, well, no, listen, we'll wrap up for today, guys. Thank you very much again, and thank you, Mike.
Thank you.
As always.
Thank you, Warren. You too.
To everybody out there, tune in shortly. We'll be discussing One Moment of Humanity, and actually on the outro, we'll run that new year 2 opening, which Tim, you mentioned Catherine Bougeot, and she did a year 1 version and a year 2 version for us. If you haven't seen it, for anybody out there, and then we'll say farewell till next week.
Fantastic.
Great. See ya.
Just need to find it. There it is.